Welcome to Spectral Shadows, where the darkness whispers and the unseen lurks. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Because horror feels different at night, especially when you're alone. Those who love their mother, like, share, and comment. Subscribe, if you dare. Now turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story number 1. This is a long story, but if I'm going to tell the truth about room 409, you need the whole picture. I've seen what happens when you only remember pieces. I don't usually post stuff like this. I've worked in law enforcement for over a decade. I've seen overdoses, suicides, disappearances. The worst humanity has to offer. You learn to compartmentalize, or the job will hollow you out. But there's one case I could never shake, one that changed everything for me. 2 bodies. No trauma. No drugs. Just 2 people, lifeless in a hotel room. Still dressed, still posed, still watching something that wasn't there anymore. The official report says we don't know how they died. That's not true. I've been to the room, I've seen what's waiting there, and I think it's time someone else did too. The photographs lay scattered across the metal tabletop like remnants of some ritual no one dared name. The images captured 2 bodies, a man and a woman. Both were twisted, but not violently. More like they had been wrung out and drained emotionally rather than physically. Their skin bore the pale gray hue of forgotten marble, smooth, bloodless, and waxen. The man and woman's eyes were wide, open, fixated on nothing, and coated in a thin film like gossamer. Their mouths were slightly parted, not in fear, but confession. No signs of struggle, no needle marks, no ligatures, no bruising. Talk screen came back clean. They were just gone, as if their souls had quietly slipped out through the pores and never looked back. It's like they ceased to exist, Brenner said beside me, settling into the seat with a look that didn't match his usual confidence. No trauma, no resistance, and no definitive cause. Coroner says it's like something pulled the soul right out of them. I didn't respond. I couldn't stop staring at the woman's face. It was a look that was truly the stuff of nightmares. There was no peaceful expression, nor was there one of distress. Instead, she appeared hollow, a shell of the woman she was before. Whatever she saw in her final uncertain moments weren't meant for human eyes. I swallowed, my eyes struggling to pull away from the blood-chilling scene in the photographs. Time of death, I finally managed, 48 hours before discovery. Best guess. Brenner shook his head. Even that's shaky, though. They were dressed and there were no signs of a struggle at all. Room service was completely untouched. The strangest part? Every mirror in the room was covered. That caught my attention. I looked up in puzzlement. Covered? Brenner acknowledged the look with a nod and resumed. Towels, bed sheets. Hell, the woman even used her coat. They covered every reflective surface in the room. It's like they were trying not to look at something, or they didn't want something to see them. I thought in silence to myself. There's more, he added grimly, his voice dropping like a stone. They had no IDs, and there were no records of any check-ins from anybody from around the time they would have been in that room. The hotel system has nothing either. They were only found because the maid smelled mildew and ozone. She said the room gave her a headache just walking past it. I flipped to another photo. The door. Room 409. The brass number plate was crooked and corroded, like the door itself had been terminally ill for a long time. I brushed the photo aside to see a photo of a note, written in frantic, borderline illegible writing. 2 simple words, written massively into the paper like a final cry for help. Never again. They weren't the first, were they? I whispered. Brenner didn't look up. No, he said, just the first we couldn't explain away. That conversation haunted me. Every detail carved itself into my memory. For months I replayed it, obsessively. That room, those photos, that look in her eyes. Something about it got under my skin, like a needle sparking the catalyst for addiction. Eventually, I gave in. I had to know what happened, not just to them, but to the others. The ones written off, forgotten, lost to time. That's when I went to the Lotus Hotel. The place wasn't even on the map anymore. The parking lot was cracked and crumbling. The building loomed behind overgrown hedges and trees half swallowed by its own neglect, as if the world had tried to erase it. The neon sign above the front doors sputtered in the rain, casting jaundiced light across the rain-slick parking lot. A few letters flickered in and out, fighting to stay lit or trying to disappear. But I knew where I was. 4th floor, room 409, where all the stories began, and where they always seemed to end. Inside, the lobby reeked of mildew and rotted wood. Wallpaper curled from the walls in long, curling strips, like peeling skin. Mold painted the corners of the baseboards. A chandelier overhead trembled in place, like it was afraid of falling, and flickered like it had forgotten how to stay lit. The elevator that rested on the other side of the room groaned in its shaft, like it was waking up reluctantly. At the front desk sat a clerk, skin the color of wet ash, eyes that didn't blink, preserved but not alive. I approached the clerk with as friendly of a demeanor as I could muster. I need the key to... Before I could even finish, he slid it across the counter, rusted and worn, the tag dangling like a noose. The tag read in spidery handwriting, Room 409. I stared at him, perplexed at how he could have possibly known what I was there for. How did you... You're not the first, the clerk voiced flatly, without weight or warmth. I winced nervously, but didn't ask what he meant. I took the key and walked to the elevator. Once inside, I pressed the button and watched the panel light up beneath my finger. The cage rattled to life as it began its slow ascension towards my destination. I leaned against the wall as it rose, thinking maybe I was being reckless, that maybe going alone was a mistake. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever answers existed, if they existed at all, they were upstairs. The 4th floor was wrong. The hallway stretched for too long, not physically, but architecturally. It was reminiscent to that of a carnival funhouse. The warped dimensions seemed to make the hallway spin and shake, making balance difficult. The proportions felt wrong, like a rib cage extended by unnatural means. The wallpaper was the color, of aged bruises and curled from the seams like dead leaves. The carpet sagged in places, stained in dark, blooming shapes that suggested something had once crawled and bled. The overhead lights blinked rapidly without any distinct rhythm as I turned my attention towards the end of the hallway. Room 409 waited at the far end like a patient. Its number plate hung crooked, edges clawed and bent, as if someone had tried to scratch it off, but was unsuccessful in doing so. The metal had refused to be erased, but just beneath the handle there was a small handprint. It wasn't smeared or pressed. It was a child's handprint that was perfectly preserved. My grip tightened around the key, chills creeping up my spine in a slow march. I've seen a lot of things. War zones, crime scenes, human grief in its rawest forms. That was all a part of the job description, but this felt different. This felt aware, calculated, deliberate. It was like the room knew who it was waiting for and had set a trap to lure me into its clutches. The key slid in like it remembered me, and the door opened without resistance to reveal that the room was normal. Was this a ruse? An illusion hiding something worse? Possibly. I blinked. I don't know what I expected. Gore, maybe. Or something supernatural right out the gate. But what I saw was a generic hotel room. Beige walls, a neatly made bed, a chair by the window, a desk with a mirror. It was bland, beige, and forgettable. Nothing you would give a second glance to. Neatly made bed, chair by the window, a desk, a mirror. But something felt off. The temperature was colder than the hallway. It wasn't freezing, but it was the kind of cold that lingers after someone breathes on your neck. There was a subtle, continuous hum that floated in the air as well. It was soft, but not mechanical. Was it the plumbing? No, that couldn't be it. Breathing? I shook it off and stepped inside. That's when the door clicked shut behind me. I jumped, then cursed under my breath. I wasn't usually this rattled, but something about this place clawed at me. It feels like I'm not supposed to be here. The light casted from the lamp dimmed by a hair, just enough to make the shadows feel participatory, watching. I scanned my surroundings again, the room feeling different than it was before, now that the lighting had changed. That's when I saw the suitcase beside the chair, and on the desk, a leather-bound journal. I picked it up and felt its cracked spine and curled edges in my hands. The texture felt like skin that had seen too much sun. This wasn't in any of the crime scene photos, I thought as I opened it. So, what was it doing here? I flipped through the pages, and to my surprise, most of them were blank. But near the back, one sentence had been scrawled in spidery handwriting into the page's center. "You're not the first." My stomach dropped. The words from the clerk downstairs, they were written here. Was this all a prank by the hotel? But before I could dwell on it further, a laugh rang out from the bathroom. It was high, sharp, but childlike in nature. I turned, my attention from the journal, and noticed that the door to the bathroom was slightly ajar. There was no light, no movement, just the creeping veil of darkness peeking out from the crack in the door. "Old pipes," I muttered, trying to believe it. My own words tasted of denial as I placed the journal back onto the desk. None of this was making sense, but I came here to get answers, and I wasn't going to leave without them. I sat at the bed's edge. The springs sighed beneath me, not from my weight, but from the memory of someone else, seemingly. My eyes surveilled the wall, studying for what could be an unknown terror beyond its unappealing features. I couldn't tell if it was the lighting, or if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the wallpaper seemed to pulse slowly like breath. Behind plaster, I stood and crossed the room towards the window, unease mounting. I expected to see a view of the outside world, but instead I was met with a brick wall. That wasn't possible. The Lotus Hotel was supposed to overlook the street from this location. How could a brick wall be here to obstruct my view? I turned my back to the window to head back towards the door to leave the room, but noticed that the door looked farther away than it had previously. It was as if the room had elongated to a disproportionate, impossible size to keep me from escape. The shadows in corners of the room had deepened due to the light shrinking in size and magnitude. My view rested itself at the mirror above the desk. Reflected the bed, the lamp, the suitcase, and me sitting back on the bed. Only I wasn't. I was standing. But the version of me in the mirror wasn't looking back anymore. I didn't move, and neither did the version of me in the mirror. My eyes transfixed on this other version of me as it sat perfectly still on the edge of the bed, hands on knees, spine straight, expression vacant. He was just like me, in an uncanny sort of way, for his posture was too precise, too stiff, not relaxed, unnatural. It was as if this other me were like a mannequin posed to imitate memory. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, but the reflection didn't follow. It stayed still, rooted in place on its spot on the bed, as its doll-like eyes trailed me. A dark, faint smile pulled at its lips in a vain attempt to perform being human. I turned away, my skin perspiring as my stomach knotted in ways I didn't know were possible. My skin prickled like I'd just remembered something out of order, like realizing I left the stove on. After hearing the fire alarm from down the street, I made for the door, boots thudding against the aged carpet in an eager attempt to escape. 1 step, 2, 3. By the 4th, the door didn't seem any closer, and by the 5th, it looked further away. How is this possible? The words fell out of my mouth like breath on glass, useless, fragile. I turned around and noticed that everything regarding my surroundings had completely changed. The mirror was gone. So was the desk and the suitcase. Even the lamp's soft, sickly warm glow, gone without a single trace. The bed was the only thing that remained. Its sheets were untouched, corners perfect. It was like it had never been used at all. The hum in the air started to grow, like cicadas on a summer day. It wasn't mechanized, nor was it the buzz of electricity or old plumbing. This was organic. It felt like the sound of breath held too long after surfacing from deep water, or like something waiting, lurking, not to be seen, but recognized. I ran a hand across my face and felt it come away damp from the sweat dampening my skin. My body felt like it was in a sauna, but the room was ice cold, like a meat locker. My throat was parched, that kind of bone-dry, grief-laced kind of thirst you get after swallowing something you were supposed to say but didn't. I looked down at my hands and noticed they were trembling slightly. It was enough to feel like a warning, an omen of something unfathomable approaching. The TV suddenly clicked on behind me. No remote, no sound. Just the static hissing in the air in an almost deafening way. A snowstorm of distortion, glitching pixels, and behind it, something else bleeding through. My living room, same worn and beat-up couch, a bottle of Jack half empty on the floor, a man's voice, hoarse, shouting. Not just any man, though. It was me, red-faced, hunched, screaming at someone just out of frame, something about trust and about lies, about... You said she was at your sister's. The footage jumped to show me all alone, crying violently, clutching a photograph in my hands like it had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. Another jump in the footage, and this time I was kneeling at a gravestone of a child. I was wearing that same trench coat and had the same weathered hands. A small toy elephant he sat behind the stone, sun-bleached, yet familiar. A hand touched my shoulder. It was my own. I recoiled in terror before the screen abruptly went to black. I could hear nothing but my frantic panting as I tried to grasp what all was happening in this moment. I stared at the completely black TV screen as it lay dormant. What was that quote from Friedrich Nietzsche? I thought, trying to regain my composure. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Was the TV the abyss gazing into me? I pondered as I pulled my eyes away, praying that this was the end of whatever hellscape I found myself entangled in. My prayers went unanswered as the TV flickered to life again. Room 409. The numbers looked diseased, peeling, melting. The footage playing before me now showed another version of me. This one was lying dead on the bed, eyes wide. The mouth was torn open, as if something had scrambled its way out from the inside, just like the crime scene photos. I watched as the words, "Never again," began being clawed across the walls in erratic, looping handwriting. The wallpaper bled the blackest ink like a gushing wound. This wasn't metaphor, this was reality. I staggered back, my heel catching on something and nearly tripping over. I turned to see that the mirror, the desk, and the journal had all returned to their previous respective places. I stumbled towards the desk and retrieved the journal. The room pulsed around me, not visibly, but vibrantly, like space had grown tired of pretending to be stable. My breath had gone shallow, and my heart beat, like it was tapping Morse code for run. The journal's worn, withered leather appeared warped from time or heat, perhaps even memory. The pages were yellowed, frayed, and soft at the edges. I flipped to the first page to reveal my own handwriting. It read, "You died here, once already. Do better this time." I stared anxiously, waiting for the ink to vanish. It didn't, however. I reached out with a slightly trembling finger and pressed it against the page. It was still warm, still fresh. Then the journal palpitated just once like a heartbeat. I snapped it shut fearfully as I watched the room begin morphing once more with my own eyes. The walls began to throb, not visually, not yet. Something behind these dreaded, bland walls had lungs. The air thickened, like breathing through wet cotton. Then came 3 knocks, soft, not loud nor impatient. These sounded expectant. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding in my throat like an incessant drum beat. These knocks didn't demand attention. They seemed to be calling to me. I reached for the handle, uncertain as to what could await me. But then I stopped. I felt something in my pocket. My hand descended to pull the object that seemingly manifested itself there, to reveal that it was a key, not the hotel key. This one was different. This one was older, more rusted. It felt heavy with meaning. Etched into its side, like sacred scripture, were 3 numbers. Behind me, the bed creaked, as if to scream in agony. I turned, but there was no one there. The mirror revealed my reflection was back, and seated, again this time. It was crying. Thick streams of crimson blood flowed down like a grotesque waterfall as it looked upon me, lips contorting into a broken, crooked smile. One that seemed to say, I'm sorry for what comes next. My knees buckled and gave out beneath me, the key clattering to the floor by my side. I floundered and fumbled like a fish out of water, reaching for anything that felt real. That's when I noticed the journal nearby and grabbed it, feeling it in my clutches once more. It radiated an unsettling warmth, and it felt heavier, like it had teeth. Before I could focus on it longer, the door opened with a sluggish, intentional groan. A thin wedge of light spilled into the room, pale and colorless. I forced myself upright against the bed and stumbled toward the doorway in a fearful silence. I gripped the door tightly and opened it wider to find myself staring down another hallway. This wasn't the one from the Lotus Hotel. This one felt older, more personal. The wallpaper was in a state of gradual but immense decay. The faded roses hemorrhaged through the plaster. The air smelled like a bygone fragrance and wood left to rot. At the end of the hallway, the light illuminated a figure. They were seated knees to chest, head bowed, in what appeared to be prayer. "Hello," I managed. My voice barely made it past my lips before the figure stirred. I was met with a pale face, with sunken features, grime and time clinging to her skin. She was like a corpse, resurrected from the depths of the earth. "Don't be afraid," she voiced in a hushed whisper. "They don't like it when you're afraid." I stepped closer, cautiously. Who are you?" She glanced upward, listening to something I couldn't hear. "Name's Marla," she answered. "Been here longer than I can remember. You're not the first to survive room 409, but..." She trailed off with hesitation, the pregnant pause lingering in the air until she finished. "You might be the first to leave and bring it with you." "Bring what?" I blinked, our eyes meeting one another's. "This place," she spoke, as she gestured towards our surroundings. "It doesn't just trap you. It copies you and follows you out, lives in the spaces between your thoughts." She curled and brought her knees to her chest, tighter. "They all say, never again. But the room remembers. It's patient. It always bides its time." The light scintillated in a menacing tone, causing Marla to flinch. "Time's running out. You need to remember what you forgot before the door closes again." What did I forget? My voice cracked like porcelain as I contemplated what I could have forgotten. Her mouth formed a sad, knowing smile. That you never really left. I blinked as her words revealed the crippling revelation of what I found myself in. She didn't. However, Marla was too still, too symmetrical, and just for a fleeting second, her shadow didn't match her body. I took a step back, wary of potential danger. Are you real? She tilted her head slightly, her eyes shifting, not with emotion, but out of mechanism. I'm what's left when remembering hurts too much, she murmured as she continued to pull her knees tightly against herself. You made me. The hallway warped. The roses bled across the wallpaper, like watercolors drowning in themselves. Marla stared past me. The room shows you what you need to see, what you fear, what you buried. Then her eyes locked onto me. But it also buries you. What memories? My fingers scratched the back of my neck, aching for answers. She rose slowly, like a moon on a lonely night. Her joints cracked, like frozen branches in winter. Her eyes were like the cold steel of iron. The ones you told yourself never happened. The hallway groaned as the shadows gathered in the corners like cockroaches. They whispered things that were almost decipherable to my own ear. The desire to understand those things was suffocating. I reached toward one. This one resembled the discernible shape of a person. It reached back, almost in longing, before Marla grabbed my wrist with force. Don't. They're not real. But they want you to believe they are. My knees buckled slightly. The smell of sulfur and rot closed in around me like a wet cloth. I'm losing myself, I whispered, nauseous from the pungent smell that filled my nostrils asphyxiatingly. Marla nodded. That's what it does, piece by piece, until you forget there ever was an actual you. Then, like a mirror, shattering inward, memory manifested itself in my conscious. A hospital room, a child's hand in mine, a toy elephant on a chair. The child's wide, uncertain eyes looked into mine as a voice echoed in the deepest recesses of my mind. I never left you. The image cracked apart and dissipated as quickly as it had appeared. I found myself back in the hallway with Marla. Her voice was sharp now. Remember what you buried before the door closes for good. I clutched the rusted key. Its weight held me steady like an anchor. The hallway began to stretch and warp, like a dream breaking apart. The far door drifted away like a ship slipping beneath a dark tide. I stood tall and cleared the bile from my throat with a cough. I'm not leaving without the truth. Marla's gaze softened. Proud, mournful, good. Because this place makes sure you never forget. She stepped backward, fading into the dark as the shadows hugged her with welcome. And sometimes she was almost gone. It demands a price. The lights shattered, and glass fell from the ceiling like scalding hail. Whispers screamed my name, laughing, crying, wailing as I shielded myself with my arms above my head. I shook the glass off me and stepped forward into the permeating darkness. I gripped the key in my hand like a lifeline. I will tell more when the time is right. But for now, let me leave you with these parting words. Don't trust your reflection. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remember the moment I woke up. My eyes snapped open to a darkness that wasn't nightfall, but annihilation. A void so complete it devoured edges, bled through form. It pressed against my skin like wet cloth. My lungs struggled to draw in air that didn't feel like mine. Breathing felt borrowed. And for a few seconds I forgot where or when I was. Hadn't I just been holding something? I thought in confusion. The metal imprint still ached in my palm like muscle memory from a dream I was only half awake from. Then my eyes caught it, a sliver of golden light spilling from the cracked door of room 409. It hadn't closed. The door was still ajar, still waiting. I sat up, the sheets clinging to my skin like they remembered a different body. Sweat, or something colder, soaked through, as if the bed had wept with me. I noticed the carpet was gone, and in its place, splintered floorboards, raw and gray, warped by moisture. My shoes and socks had vanished, and I could feel the grain of the wood digging into the soles of my feet, as if the hotel had peeled back a layer of comfort on purpose. There was no sound, no droning sounds from the lights, no wind against the windows. Just silence, thick and watchful, and then a child's laugh pierced the quiet. It was soft and familiar, but it didn't come from in front of me. It came from behind like a memory, masquerading as sound, muffled by time. I followed it into the hallway, eager but slightly frightened at where I was being led. The geometry of the hallway had changed once again. It stretched unnaturally long and narrow, the walls bowing inward like something exhaling. Wallpaper peeled in uneven strips, revealing something beneath that pulsed faintly. Not wood, not concrete. Skin. Somewhere ahead a door creaked open, then another and another. Door after door stretched down the corridor. No room bore a number now. Their placards had rotted away or fused to the walls. Some doors were marked with ash. Others bore sigils carved deep and angry into the surface. Some I recognized from dreams I'd never spoken aloud. None of them were inviting. The laugh came again, this time layered, a woman's voice humming beneath it. A lullaby. I knew that melody. I walked on, deeper into the hallway that shouldn't exist. It narrowed into a point, terminating in a single, untouched door. Unlike the others, this one was perfect, gleaming cherry wood. Brass doorknob. A soft orange glow leaked from underneath, pulsing like breath. The scent hit me before I reached it. Lavender shampoo, baby powder, the soft warmth of blankets left in the sun, and something else. Pine, old plaster, mold. The smell belonged to her. Room. I opened the door and stepped inside. It wasn't like her room. It was her room. Every detail, down to the plastic horses lined on the shelf in height order, the stained rug with dried juice marks, the crooked poster she made me promise not to fix, the crack in the ceiling from the night we tried to hang, fairy lights, and even the paper stars taped to the ceiling. Some curling, some half-fallen, was here. A bookshelf stood by the wall, dog-eared fairy tales, A journal with puffed unicorn stickers, crayons scattered like fall leaves all over the floor. But some details were too perfect. The drawings were recent, dated with today's date in a crayon she didn't have, and her stuffed elephant, Mr. Gray, that rested on her bed. He had his missing eye sewn back on, with a needle still stuck in the seam. The air felt heavier here, not oppressive, but sacred. My throat tightened, lungs refused to fill. The room that shouldn't even exist anymore. We boxed most of it up after the funeral. The rest was sold or thrown away. My knees buckled at the realization that this wasn't a memory. This was something more. "Daddy?" I was startled by the voice. It was one I hadn't heard in years. I froze in place like a snapshot in time. The room was empty, except it wasn't. In the corner, beyond the lamplight, stood a silhouette, child-sized, flickering like old film, its edges frayed and wrong. "Did you find the story yet?" it asked in her voice, but not quite. It sounded faintly distorted. I felt a lump form in my throat as I asked, "What story?" "The one you stopped telling me." The voice didn't come from her mouth anymore. It came from inside me. I doubled over and felt the world fold in on itself. The light flickered, and the room contorted itself in a sickening metamorphosis to reveal that I was back in the hospital. The bright lights beamed overhead, making the bleached walls glisten in a melancholic way. The sterile silence of the room was broken only by the mechanical rhythm of beeping monitors. I saw my ex-wife, Claire, sobbing next to me as I sat beside her, and the girl in the bed, my daughter. Her hand was warm in mine as she lay in the bed, with IVs in her arms. "I'm scared," she murmured, her smile cracked but defiant. I continued to gently hold her hand in mine, tears fighting to be released from my eyes. I couldn't let them out. I had to be strong for her. The most I could do was deliver a small smile as her hand slowly curled into a gentle fist. That's when she uttered the words, "Tell me the story again." I remember the silence and the way I held her hand. But I didn't tell the story. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I couldn't find the words. I'd told it so many times, until I couldn't anymore. Until the endings became too hard to fake. Am I gonna go to the room, too? I flinched, my blood turning to ice. What room? But I already knew what she was talking about. My heart plummeted as she looked past me toward a corner of the hospital room where something unseen loomed. The one with whispering walls. She breathed, her voice seemingly echoing off the walls. "The one in your head, that's when the monitor flatlined. I didn't kill her. I just didn't stop it when I could have. That's what makes it worse." I snapped back to the present with a horrific gasp as I staggered and caught myself against a nearby door frame. I was back in the hallway, my hands on the floor, bloody, splinters embedded in my palms. The elephant, the hospital room, my ex-wife, my daughter, all gone. The only proof she had ever been here were 5 small fingerprints across my chest. Still warm, still soft, still hers. I didn't know what was real or not anymore. That's when I made the decision to escape. I ran, or maybe I didn't. It felt like my legs were carrying me. But it also felt like I was just running in place. The halls looped and twisted like paper curling in fire. The ceiling lowered, and the walls folded inward. Doors multiplied and opened, fanning outward in impossible angles, like veins branching from a central artery, and behind each one, a different version of myself. One screaming, one begging, one silent, and holding the elephant, all of them mouthing the same thing. You're not the first, but maybe you're the last. The words echoed like a bell struck underwater. It was muffled, warbled, but deep. Anchored. One hallway gleamed with new wallpaper, champagne trays, laughter. The next, bloated ceilings, black mold bleeding from vents. The lotus flickering between what it was and what it became. Time wasn't moving forward anymore. It was folding, breathing, watching me. I stopped, lungs burning like a raging inferno, thoughts unraveling, feeling like time had been gnawing at my sanity, one loop at a time. I noticed a mirror that had appeared beside an elevator that hadn't been there a second ago. I peered into it, but the man staring back didn't follow my movements. He watched with a sinister smile, mouthing the words, "You're already here." The elevator chimed, and I turned to see its doors open, as if it were imploring me to leave this nightmare behind. Inside, no numbers, just a single downward arrow. The button pulsed. I stepped in. The descent was silent. Each time the doors opened, I saw glimpses, a hallway where figures stood with their backs turned, whispering in unison. A ballroom decaying on one side, pristine on the other. A room of floating clocks, all set to different times, ticking backward. My name etched on every face. I pressed no button, the elevator seemingly choosing where it wanted me to go, what to see. When it stopped, I stepped into what looked like the front desk, or a dream of it. The air shimmered like a memory trying to hold itself together. There was a journal open on the counter with my name on the front. Turned the pages and noticed that the entries were all dated from years ago, but were all in my handwriting. Even more peculiar was that the contents of the journal were comprised of things that I didn't completely remember writing. Some I did, but they had ended differently. One note in the margin caught my eye, circled repeatedly until the ink bled through. You stayed because you couldn't forgive yourself. You can leave, but you will have to leave him behind. The desk drawer creaked open. Inside, her crayon drawings, letters addressed to me. I didn't remember ever seeing them. I don't know how she sent them, but her handwriting was unmistakable. The last one just said, "It's okay, Daddy. You don't have to be sad anymore. I'll remember the story for you." Below it, a child's handprint. Tears I didn't even know had formed in my eyes began falling like rain as I realized that the bloody print on my clothes was the same handprint from her. It glowed faintly as I touched it. The hotel exhaled, not metaphorically, but as if it had been holding its breath in anticipation. The walls breathed, and the light pulsated before ceasing to do so. The air froze, and the consistent buzz went silent. I turned my attention to the light shining through the glass of the entrance doors. I walked towards the door, no whispers, no humming, no warping of reality, just silence and plumbing somewhere overhead. I placed my hand against the glass cool, solid, real. Outside, life was happening. A man pacing on his phone. A woman lighting a cigarette. A mother walking hand in hand with her daughter. I could see my car, the parking lot, the world, home. The rain that was once coming down in a torrential downpour had stopped. I could go. I could finally leave. Then I heard someone speak my name. Before I could even react, I found myself back in room 409. The lights flickered, and the mirror on the wall no longer showed my own reflection. The door was open, revealing the hallway and a figure walking down it. A man, same build, same coat, same stride, same face, but the posture was too confident, the eyes too dry. Not his eyes, not anymore. The journal was open again. All the previous entries of mine were erased now. New pages, new ink. That was fresh and wet. That's the man you became when you stopped feeling. He remembers how to pretend, how to smile. He's the version who left her, the one who never cried. My breath hitched as the memory stabbed me behind the eyes. A playground, a father in a car, watching children laugh, feeling nothing. No ache, no yearning, just an all-consuming void emptiness, absence where pain should be. That version had survived, and now he was walking away. You can still follow him, the journal offered, but if you do, you will forget all of this. You will forget her. My fingers hovered above the page momentarily with hesitance before flipping the page. I let out a pained cry as I felt the paper scorch my skin with an intense heat, and I pulled my hand away immediately. I gasped, recoiling as the journal slammed shut with a wet thud. The mirror shattered. I turned back toward the open doorway. The hallway was gone, erased, replaced by a wall of black. Not shadow, not void, just absence. And then, footsteps behind me, measured, soft, intentional. I turned and came face to face with myself. It wasn't a reflection, nor was it a memory. It was a man same height, same build, same trench coat, but the eyes, dead. Glass marbles where grief used to live. You shouldn't have come back. My reflection spoke. His voice was clinical, hollowed of heat. People like us don't get closure. We get consequences. He stepped closer. I buried it, all of it. The guilt, the noise, her, and you. You're digging it back up like it's going to save you. I backed away. I didn't come here to be saved. The other laughed. Once. Cold and humorless. No. You came here to bleed. I clenched my fists. I didn't want this. Yes, you did, the other said, stepping closer. We built this place. You and me. Brick by brick. Memory by memory. We are the room. A long silence, and then, the room doesn't forgive. And the journal on the desk opened itself. The final page. No scroll, just 5 words. If you want to leave. Another line appeared. One of you must stay. I watched my reflection dissipate with a dark smile as a door suddenly creaked open. Not the door to the hallway, another door, one that hadn't been there before. The closet, now wide open. I should have left, but something kept pulling me deeper. Not a force, a thread. Something I'd tied myself. I ventured into the darkness of the closet, away from room 409. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes, Hours, years, until I was there again. Eventually, the hallway changed. The flickering lights stopped. The mildew faded. The walls turned crisp and clean, bathed in a warm amber glow. I'd made it. The front lobby. It was too quiet. No one at the concierge desk. No guests. No bellhop. Just menacing tranquility, like the building was suppressing the urge to tell a secret. I walked toward the front desk. The lights above buzzed. Something about the air felt staged, like a photograph. That's when I saw the frame, a cheap black and gold. Plaque sat crooked on the counter like a forgotten joke, beside a dusty pen jar. Inside it, a photo, me dressed in the same clothes I was wearing now, only smiling, forced, wrong. Below the picture, Employee of the Month. January 2015. My stomach turned. The blood drained from my face. I reached for the photo with a trembling hand, but a voice stopped me. It was calm and familiar. It's always someone's turn. I turned, and the man standing in front of me was me, but not quite. His eyes were tired, worn out like an old VHS tape that had been played too many times. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "You'll get used to it," he said. "We all do." Then he stepped aside, gesturing back toward the long hallway behind him. The door to room 409 stood open at the far end, waiting. My nameplate was already back on it. Somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered, "Tell me the story again." I opened my eyes and found myself back in the bed, within room 409. The sheets were tucked, like a nurse's apology. Sunlight poured in through cracked blinds. Outside, birds chirped. Somewhere far away, the smell of fresh coffee wafted through a hallway that shouldn't exist. Everything felt normal, which is how I knew it wasn't. The wallpaper didn't breathe. The mirror didn't whisper. The notebook was gone. The silence was polite. It felt like a dream trying to pass as a memory. I stood. My coat hung on the back of a chair, clean, pressed, unscarred. I slipped it on. It fit too well. For a fleeting second, I almost believed I was free. Downstairs, the lobby was quiet, empty, no mildew, no static hum in the vents, just sunlight. I stepped outside. The air was sharp and fresh, no longer polluted from the scent of the sky bleeding rain. My car was waiting, and my keys found their way into my hand out of instinct. The engine purred to life as I drove past blinking stoplights, past kids with backpacks and shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks. The kind of world where tragedy only lives in newspaper headlines. It felt like waking up from an unfathomable nightmare. Maybe that's what I wanted all along, to believe this was just a dream. At some point during my drive, I decided to stop off at a gas station to use the restroom. The water swirled red as I washed my hands. Not blood. Something older. Remembrance. I looked up. My face smiled back. Rested. Too rested. Like grief had been ironed out of all the pores of my skin. I forced a smile. The reflection held it longer than I did. Then, behind me, you left me. My heart stopped. I turned. Empty bathroom stalls. Silent, except one was ajar. Wet child-sized footprints trailed from the tiles. Back in the mirror, Mr. Gray sat on the counter behind me. And my reflection? It didn't move. It just watched me. Disturbed by what I was experiencing, I left the bathroom in a panic. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The drive home was uneventful but ephemeral. I was just happy to be in the outside world again and away from that dreaded place. I placed the key in lock of the door and noticed that the lights were already on. My apartment looked rather immaculate. The couch, dishes, and books were all pristine and organized appropriately. I noticed one particular photo on the wall, though, one I was sure I had taken down months ago. My little girl, holding Mr. Gray. I turned toward the dining table and noticed that the journal from the hotel was there. No dust, no reason, just resting out in the open, as if it were anticipating my arrival. I didn't touch it, not yet. My phone buzzed softly as I reached down to grab it. The screen was lit up with the notification of a new voicemail. I didn't remember calling anyone. I pressed play and began listening with fearful eagerness. I heard my voice speaking, but it also wasn't mine. It was flat, lifeless, eerily mechanical. It was like someone was reading from a script with complete disinterest in the subject matter. I'm home now. It's safe here. I'm better now. I deleted it and thought that was the end. But then it returned. Same timestamp. Same flat voice, like it had never left. As quickly as I deleted these voicemails, though, they would appear in my inbox again and again. No matter how many times I tried to delete it, it would come back. I eventually chalked up my endeavors as fruitless and walked to the bedroom where a lamp glowed somewhat ominously in the corner. Blue, the exact shade she liked. And beneath the lighting, sitting cross-legged, was the girl in the photograph with Mr. Gray. It was Emily, my little girl, my daughter. She didn't move, and she didn't blink. She just sat underneath the glow of the lamp, as if she were in a period of stasis. But when I whispered her name, she looked up. I didn't want to go alone. She spoke in a hushed tone. Her voice was purely air, barely more than a faint breath. I stepped closer, my knees shaking. You weren't alone, Emily. She shook her head. Yes, I was. You left me in the dark. I didn't want to see you suffer anymore, honey. I whimpered, fighting the tears that threatened to trail down my face. Why did you do this? She reached out and touched my fingers. They were warm, real. And then as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. Like she'd never been there. The lamp flickered, black and blue, pulsating the room briefly before the colors surrendered to the darkness. I screamed into the mattress, begging internally for a god that I didn't even know existed to release me from this agony. No sound came out, just a heavy and sustained breath of emotional turmoil. The weight of everything I never said. Things started unraveling the next morning, despite the world pretending again. I brewed my coffee, made some breakfast, and watched TV in the living room. Did my best to block out the previous day's events. But no matter what I did, it seemed like my mind constantly gravitated back towards it. Finished up watching a random program and went to go wash my dirty dishes when I felt like a pair of eyes were upon me. It felt like I was being watched by someone. or something. I looked around, but didn't see anything except the journal, the one from room 409 on my dining room table. I walked towards it and noticed that it was open. It only had one line written across the page. "How many times will you bury her to protect yourself?" I slammed it shut. The leather felt like melted flesh against my hand as I threw it across the room. I watched in pure astonishment as it vanished in midair. That was the first of many things that I couldn't begin to explain. In the bathroom mirror, I watched myself walk away. Another time I saw my reflection smile when I didn't. A girl on the sidewalk whispered in my daughter's voice, "I still remember you." The sound of peeling wallpaper buzzed behind my teeth. Most disturbingly, though, the journal followed me no matter where I went. I couldn't get rid of it either. I would throw it away, tear it apart, set it on fire, but it always came back to me in immaculate condition, in the fridge, in the mailbox, in the cabinets. It was always soaked in red ink, and each time it reassembled itself, new words would be carved into its pages. "You didn't survive. You split. He's wearing your face now. The room didn't trap you. You brought it with you." The words haunted me even behind my eyelids, to the point that I stopped trying to run away or destroy it. One night, I dropped to the floor beside my bed and reached under it. The journal was there because, of course, it would be. Every page had been written in, but not by my own hand. By Emily's, drawings, scribbles, all the stories we never finished. Things she might have whispered to me if she had more time to. My eyes fell upon the words inscribed on the final page. "You thought healing meant pretending, but healing means feeling, and you won't let yourself." Her scent suddenly infiltrated my nostrils. Shampoo, baby powder, the hallway after bath time. 3 knocks slowly reverberated throughout the room, not from the door, but from inside the closet. I turned. I already knew it was waiting. I opened the door, and the dark inside breathed out. The closet wasn't a closet. It never had been. It was an invitation shaped like absence. I stepped inside, and the dark swallowed my vision. Hands brushed old coats, cardboard, boxes. For a second I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined it all. Then the floor shifted, not in weight, but in memory. Suddenly I found myself in a hallway. It wasn't mine, nor the hotel's. It was somewhere between. The carpet was the color of faded red, like wine was spilt violently onto it. The wallpaper was a vine green and seemed to sprawl endlessly. My ex-wife Claire picked it once. Before we knew what kind of grief waited in the walls, the hallway stretched in both directions, unending, dream-warped. It was infinite, but familiar, like grief that forgot where it began. There was no closet behind me, no apartment, only this place. I reached out and traced my fingers slowly along the wall. It pulsed, like it remembered me. In the wallpaper, faint etchings, a child's drawing, a hospital wristband, a courtroom door. This wasn't a hallway. It was a map comprised of everything I'd refused to remember. Doors lined the hallway like soldiers waiting to take orders. They bore no numbers, only marks and symbols of various kinds. A handprint, a burn, a crayon sun. I opened the first door and stepped into Emily's room. Not a version of it. It was her room, exactly how it had been, and standing in the corner, in her unicorn pajamas, was Emily. She didn't look up. Instead, she just moved her thumbs like she was texting someone far away. "Sweetheart," I cautiously inched towards her, uncertain of what could potentially transpire. She didn't answer, but rather kept moving her thumbs. I stepped closer, the air thickening like a blanket of sorrow wrapping itself against my skin. "I'm sorry," the apology leaving me like a gasp. "I never stopped missing you. I just didn't know how to carry it." She looked up with tired, bloodshot eyes. They weren't angry, but rather glassy with disappointment. "You left me in the room," she murmured with childlike sadness. "I didn't mean to." I waited. Her interruption made my blood turn to ice. She had never been that way with me before. I reached out for her, but she evaporated like a mist. I was left stupefied, nothing but the air and silence to offer me comfort. The door to the room was gone, now too. Only the walls remained now. For a moment I knew how Fortunato felt, walled in, forgotten, sealed behind silence. Eventually, the door to the room manifested itself again. I opened it, and I began walking down the hallway to navigate my way out of this hellscape I found myself in. Door after door appeared. What awaited me on the other side was emotionally heavier than the last, an empty hospital corridor that felt cold like a morgue. Claire crying in a car, her body shuddering violently with grief. My mother's silence when I told her the machines were being turned off. The room was a map with each grief serving as a landmark. Each memory was a trap door, and it kept building out of me, like vines on an abandoned structure. I stepped through the last door, the hallway's shape already forgetting itself behind me, its impermanence pressing down like a weight I couldn't carry. Home awaited me on the other side. Sunlight beamed through the kitchen windows as I was greeted with the faint smell of toast and coffee. As I was walking around the kitchen, my phone buzzed. A notification revealed that I had received a message from Marla. "You're slipping again. The room's getting in." How could she have contacted me? I wasn't sure she even existed. The message disappeared seconds later and was instead replaced by, "Come back before it keeps more of you." I placed my phone back in my pocket, my eyes falling upon the journal that waited nearby on the table. It was open, and in Claire's own handwriting it said, "You loved us, but you hated what it made you feel. You buried her so deep, you forgot where you left her. That's why it can follow you, because part of you never left that room." Below that, smaller ink, "We're not ghosts. You are." Later I walked to the park in an attempt to clear my head. The sun was warm. The sound of children's laughter and swings creaking filled the air. It almost felt real. Almost. Until, Dad, I turned. Emily was standing near the swings with the other kids. She was alive and smiling. Not spectral, not wrong, just her. I approached, a smile finally making an appearance. "Emily?" She softly nodded. Behind her, every swing creaked, perfectly, in unison. The other kids were gone. The sky blinked in almost strobe light effect, like it was forgetting how to hold its shape. The grass warped until it found its identity again as the hotel carpet. The tree bark twisted into plaster. The world morphed, and reality seemed to break all laws of known physics known to man. As everything began to settle, I realized I was back in room 409. It was as if I'd never left. The journal was on the desk again, but this time, the words weren't written. They were spoken. Claire's voice rising from the pages like breath-fogging glass. You keep trying to go forward with parts of you missing, but the room doesn't forget. It keeps what you tried to leave behind. I looked in the mirror. I was asleep. Even though I was awake, my reflection breathed. I didn't. It blinked. I didn't. Behind me. The closet creaked open, looking more like a casket than an invitation. The room let me run, but it knew I'd built it myself. It wasn't done with me, because I never stopped needing it. Room 409 doesn't keep you. It becomes you. The room doesn't imprison you. It convinces you that you left of your own free will. But every hallway I manage to escape becomes a replica, a false sense of security and safety. Grief doesn't die. It decorates. It builds walls out of the memories that I don't trust, gifts me keys I don't remember earning, and it multiplies the number of doors I must walk through. Some doors lead to moments that I swore never happened, but I couldn't tell you if they did or not. Others feel too tender to be false. The room knows that I will open any door if I think she's behind it. My one hope is finding the right door so that I can take my little girl home. I navigated my way through the thick darkness of the closet, only to emerge back into the hallway this time. Not in bed, not on the floor, just there. Too quiet, too clean, too curated. My knees gave out, and I slid down the wall, slumping against the peeling wallpaper like a drunk dragged out mid-dream. The rough texture of the wallpaper pricked at my skin like thorns as the lights above me buzzed with indecision, flickering in and out, caught between seconds. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I didn't want to, because I knew the truth before I even looked. I was back, not free, just deeper. I stood slowly, joints stiff, breath stale in my throat, and that's when I saw them. Not one room 409, but two, one door. Rusted over, scorched black around the handle like it had once been set ablaze. The other, soft, sea glass green, lit from within by the kind of warmth only nostalgia can fake. I reached for the burnt door first, only to realize it wouldn't budge. Locked. The green one, it opened by itself, as if imploring me to explore its interior. The hallway behind me vanished. The path led only forward. Now, I walked into the room slowly, only to realize that this was my own living room. It didn't feel like home, though. Felt like a replica, like a too-perfect stage set, waiting for actors who never come. The throw blanket was folded neatly across the arm of the couch. The air was stale, but free of dust. Familiar, but wrong. It was as if someone had reconstructed it from memory instead of experience. There was a book on the coffee table that I didn't recognize, a study of grief in nonlinear time. I picked it up to study it further and noticed that there was no author or a barcode. I opened the cover and noticed a handwritten note inscribed on the first page. What you bury does not die. It waits in corners, closets, and in the reflection that lags a little too long. My hands were shaking before I realized I was holding the journal again, but not in my hands. in my daughter's hands. I screamed in fright and dropped the journal, but like a cat that lands on its feet, it landed perfectly, open. New words filled the page where the old ones were. You're not the only one who lived here. Memory is a hallway. You didn't build all the doors. I backed away from the journal quickly and noticed that silence of the house had grown deafening. I moved room to room, kitchen, bedroom, hallway. Every space eerily pristine, untouched like a crime scene, scrubbed clean. Sanitized grief. That is when it shifted. The hallway lengthened to disorienting proportions. It was subtle at first. A few extra inches, then feet, then yards. That old rose-colored wallpaper peeled from the edges, revealing something familiar beneath it. The bones of room 409. It was bleeding through my life again, followed. The door was new this time. It was sea glass green, worn brass knob scuffed down to silver, a victim to the erosion of time. I hesitated before I opened it. Inside, a child's room awaited me. But it was not Emily's. Different toys littered. The floor and the walls were covered in drawings I didn't recognize. They consisted of stick figures with hands too long, all smiling like they didn't know how not to. And in the center of the bed sat a boy. He had chestnut brown hair with tiny freckles that adorned his face. He had eyes that looked far too old to belong to someone that small. He looked up at me and smiled. Hi. I froze, unsure who this child was. I think I'm in the wrong. You came back, he said. I blinked in confusion. Do I know you? He tilted his head slightly as if he found my question funny. Not yet. It was in that moment that I felt it. That static that buzzed behind my eyes like a hive of enraged hornets. The one I'd learned to associate with the room. It was watching me again. The boy's smile faded. You remember her, don't you? Your daughter? I nodded stiffly, fear guiding my movements like a marionette. Then remember me. The walls vibrated intensely as the drawings that decorated them on them twisted and distorted until the stick figures became me. The drawings depicted me crying, screaming, blank-faced and standing in between a black and green door. Who are you? The question lurching from my throat. The boy stood up from his position on the bed. I'm the morning you left the blinds closed. The day her laugh slipped away. The moment you stopped caring. I'm the version of you that never left the room. The sound of a door screeching open came from behind me. I turned to see that it wasn't a closet anymore that I was looking at. It was a hospital room. Emily's hospital room. The bed was empty. The sheets disheveled. Mr. Gray, the stuffed elephant, was torn apart. The stuffing strewn across the linoleum like snow. When I turned back, the boy was gone. The journal was in the place where he had been standing. A new page was open for me to read. You thought grief ended when the tears stopped, but silence is where it grows strongest. I ran through shifting rooms and bending hallways. Furniture contorted into unnameable shapes. Doorways opened into impossible spaces. Reality glitching and gasping for its final breaths. Static droned in my ears as Emily's voice echoed from within the walls, like a voice trapped inside a cave. Faint, distant, warped. You left me in the dark too long, I became something else. I burst into the living room again, but it wasn't mine anymore. The photographs were all wrong. One showed me with no face. In another, Claire's eyes were scratched out. In the last, Emily stood alone at the playground, by the swing set. I rushed to the front door and pulled at the door, begging to be free. But nothing. It wasn't stuck. It wasn't locked. It just wasn't real. The journal was waiting for me on the dining table, like a guest waiting for dinner. I didn't want to read it, but at the same time, I did. With morbid curiosity, my eyes befell the pages again. Sometimes the room doesn't show you what happened. Sometimes it shows you what you're becoming. Then came the knocks. Soft, restrained. At the window, I looked to see that standing outside, in the rain, was me. A younger version of me somehow. His eyes were wilder than mine. Consumed with grief, a cracked and splintered smile adorned his face. He was clutching something in his hand, something I recognized immediately. It was a room key. When he raised his hand and dropped it on the windowsill before turning to walk away, I flung the window open and cried out after him. But there was no man or rain, just a hallway. It was stretched out like an open wound, the rose wallpaper pulsing beneath the beige paint, like a beast in a deep slumber. My world had become the room I collapsed onto, the couch in a disheveled heap, unsure if I was exhausted or just empty. The air buzzed slightly, not with sound, but with sorrow. It had shape now, actual weight to it. Then a voice permeated from the walls. It wasn't Claire's or Emily's voice I heard. It was my own. But it was older, gruff, significantly more bitter, worn down by time, guilt, and memory. You can't bury grief like a body. It doesn't rot. It roots. "What do I do?" I asked, uncertainty dripping in every word of my question. "You do the hardest thing. You remember everything, even the parts that hurt. Those, especially." The voice dissipated as yet another door appeared before me. It was sea glass green again. It opened before I reached for it. I stepped through and saw the same child's room as before, only now the boy was gone. The bed sat empty, perfectly undisturbed like a lie frozen in time. On the wall rested a mirror. That wasn't there last time, I thought, as I found myself walking towards it. I closed my eyes, fearful of the reflection that awaited me. I opened them slowly, reluctantly. It revealed me, finally. Me. There was no smile, no delay. The man in the mirror perfectly reflected me, for the first time in what felt like hours, days, maybe years. My reflection wasn't lying. Beside me, the journal hovered in the air like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The pages turned like a wind was directing it to do so, until it landed on the final page. It read, "It's not about leaving the room. It's about choosing what you bring with you when you do." I didn't look away from the mirror. I held my gaze like I was delivering a testimony. "I'm here." I spoke, my eyes focusing with intent. My reflection nodded as if to say, "For now." The room didn't slam shut. It quietly closed and folded like a book after its final chapter. The air became heavier, warmer, as if someone had been crying in it for hours. I turned back to see that the hallway was gone and had been replaced with a stairwell. There was no railing, just worn wooden steps spiraling downward into the cold depths below. As I approached, I noticed something was carved into the first step. "You've remembered too much to go back." I swallowed nervously and took the stairs one step at a time, slowly descending towards whatever fate awaited me at the bottom. Each step beneath my feet echoed wrong, not with footsteps, but with faint whispers. It was your fault. You weren't there. She was waiting. You didn't come. I tried to remember her laugh, but the room was louder. It drowned out my every thought, like TV static. It was enough to make me scream, but I stayed resilient until I made it to the bottom. When I reached the last stair, I noticed a door. It was unmarked, and weeping, thick blackened water leaked from beneath it, slow as molasses, heavy as oil. I reached for the handle and felt a harsh heat burn my palm, like the room on the other side was ablaze. I pulled away, but the door opened on its own accord. Inside, a kitchen, the low sound of a child laughing from another room. It felt familiar and safe, too safe. It felt like a trap disguised as comfort. Every chair was perfectly angled, every photo frame dustless. The lamplight illuminated the room in a soft gold, like memory filtered through nostalgia. I stepped toward the counter and noticed an open lunchbox sitting there. It was a deep shade of purple and covered in stars. A sticky note sat beside it. "Read. You'll do better today. I believe in you." That I stared at the note. It was in my handwriting, but I never wrote it. The hallway compelled me toward the framed photos lining the wall. Birthday parties she never had. Beach vacations we never took. Her graduation, years too far ahead. All these memories decorated the wall. I reached out to touch one and felt the image ripple, like I was touching water. The room wasn't showing the past. It was fabricating an entire future. It was nothing more than an elaborate lie. It was offering forgiveness I hadn't earned, and I almost accepted its apology. Almost. That is, until I saw the final door. It was a small and narrow closet. Inside sat a woman in a chair, head bowed as if she were napping. Claire. Her name hung in the air in quiet suspension as I awaited a response. She lifted her head slowly to reveal her bloodshot eyes and sickly pale skin. "You're not supposed to be here," she warned tiredly. I knelt beside her. I had to know. She looked at me with something like pity. "There's a reason we buried it. The room showed me too. What comes after and what you won't survive." "What did it show you?" I pleaded, eager for more answers. Her pregnant pause filled my heart with tension before she finally spoke to me again. "Emily and I, we forgave you, didn't we? That's what you needed us to do. What you wanted." I reached for her hand. It was cold, but not lifeless. "You're not her," I acknowledged as I pulled my hand away. She offered a soft smile, laced with sadness. "I'm the version of me you needed, the peace you imagined, not the truth." I stood and watched as the closet and the darkness behind her deepen. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of the 3 numbers on a placard that have come to haunt me. 9. The loop always ends here. I looked down one last time. You're not real, Claire nodded, and neither is the version of you that keeps pretending you're healing. She faded before my eyes, as did the world around us, as I found myself back inside room 409, alone. Then came several loud knocks. At first I thought it came from the door. Then I realized that they were coming from beneath the bed. I slowly crouched to peek underneath. There was no figure, just a piece of folded paper. It was written in Emily's handwriting. You said you'd stay, but you left me with the room. I dropped to my knees and wept, the emotional dam finally giving way. My tears were not ones of fear. They were of recognition from finally understanding that I had never left. My body went home, filed reports, and wore smiles. But the part of me that held her hand when the machines turned off, that part never made it out. And the room, it fed that part comfort, false memories, and just enough hope to continue to play pretend until the truth was just one version of the story. I wiped the tears that stained my face and saw it. A door had manifested itself in the middle of the room. It was new, but not. The door was numbered. 9. The journal sat in front of it, its pages fluttering. I opened it and noticed there was only one line embedded into the page. If you walk through this door, there's no forgetting again. I turned the page, blank except there was a key. Etched into it were the numbers, 409, and beneath it, Emily's name. I whispered it aloud like prayer, surrendering myself to the room. It shuddered and drew its breath before letting out an exhale that felt final before I opened the door and stepped through the doorway. Inside things were familiar once again, but not mine. The room looked almost untouched. Bed made, curtains drawn, no blood on the carpet. There were details I couldn't explain, however. There was a pair of women's shoes by the dresser, and a little girl's coat draped over the chair. Static blared from the TV in a deafening manner as I approached it. As I got closer, I noticed a VHS tape resting on the nightstand. Its worn-out label read, Room 409, Short Film. I inserted the tape into the battered VCR under the television and watched the screen crackle to life. At first only a title card, The Lotus Hotel Presents. Then, me, standing with Brenner and other investigators in a brightly lit room, looking down at the photographs of a man and a woman, narrating the scene. Only, I wasn't speaking. My mouth moved, but a different voice spilled out. Slower, brittle, almost stitched together from a dozen different recordings, like memories falsifying their own reconstruction. A voice made from fragments rather than complete thoughts. The lines it spoke, they were mine. From the briefing with Brenner, from the report, from the story I told myself. The detective believes he's solving a crime, but what he's really doing is running from the ending. I shut it off, and as I did, the light too. The bathroom turned on. It was like I was being beckoned by the room to explore further. I headed towards the bathroom and found a file folder on the sink. The cover bore my name. Handwritten inside were intake forms, psych evaluations, and words like disassociation and trauma-fueled construct. There were dates on the reports as well. Some matched the timeline I remembered. and others were from almost a decade earlier. There was even a photo of me. I had shorter hair, wore a hospital bracelet, and had eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in years. That's when I noticed it. The mirror behind the sink, and the version of me staring back. He didn't move when I did. He didn't flinch when I recoiled. He just stood there, smiling, slowly, sadly. "Who are you?" I trembled. He mouthed back, "The real one, the one who never left." I ran out of the bathroom and down the hallway, adrenaline coursing through my veins as my feet thudded against the carpeted flooring. My feet guided me through the stairwell. The lobby flickered, pristine, then rotted, two timelines fighting to overwrite one another. A bellhop stood at the front desk, humming to himself. When I approached, he turned and had my face. "Welcome back, Mr. Cartwright," he said courteously. "Will you be staying with us long this time?" I backed away, the color draining from my face as the elevator dinged behind me. I watched the doors open and heard a child's voice singing softly from within. "Emily, row, row, row your boat." I practically leapt into the elevator and pressed the buttons in a frantic plea that one of them will lead me towards the exit. I hit every floor. Each opened to a different version of the Lotus. One looked like a hospital, one like a courtroom, one like a funeral home. In one, I saw myself sitting with a doctor. In another, I stood at a graveside alone. All timelines, all versions of me. I couldn't breathe. Eventually, I made it back to room 409. The original one, I think. Or maybe a new copy. It didn't matter anymore. I stepped inside. The lights were dim. Dust settled in slow motion. The air felt ancient. And there, burned into the wallpaper above the bed in blackened letters, "This is the room you made to forget her." And for the first time, I didn't want to leave. "You're still here." Good. Most people don't make it this far. They usually cannibalize themselves in grief, or the room consumes them whole. But you are different. You have been listening. You have felt the walls breathing, like I have. There's something I didn't tell you before, something that you desperately need to know. You're not a prisoner to the room. You're a subject. It studies you. Every shiver, every pause, every secret in the darkest crevices of your mind. It can and will get inside you. Once it knows you inside and out, it opens a door to the very things that terrify you to your core. Mine is waiting, and I think she's on the other side. The key felt impossibly heavy, like it had carried 1,000 lifetimes before it ever touched my palm. It burned in my grip, like it didn't want to be held. I turned it over in my hand, and there, etched into its side beneath layers of grime and age, was her name, Emily. It was a name, an invocation, and a reckoning all at once. A crescendo to the nightmare I had wandered through longer than time could measure. And there it was, the door. It was the same sea glass green one from earlier. Always there, always unreliable, like a broken record. The key pulsated like a throbbing heart as I stepped through the door. This time, the lies of the room collapsed. There was no peeling wallpaper, no dusty warmth, no illusions of comfort, just a blanket of darkness. and then the unmistakable and heartbreaking sound of a flat line. One sharp, endless mechanical screech, piercing the air. The hollow scream, dripping in emotional turmoil that followed, wasn't hers. It was mine. I blinked, and I found myself back in the room. Tranquility, the kind that silences instead of calms. The key that once scalded my hand was nowhere to be found. Its outline was singed into my hand faintly, like a haunting reminder of what I was supposed to be carrying. The journal lay open on the nightstand, waiting like a flower before dawn. One line covered the page in jagged scrawl. The room can end, but will you let it? I walked through the unsettling quiet that plagued my surroundings. Everything was preserved like a museum. The bed made, the windows sealed, the air too still to breathe. On the dresser rested Claire's wedding ring, an unmistakable relic of a bygone relationship. On the table, Emily's last crayon drawing. Reds, blues, purples, a child's joy and creativity preserved on paper. A faint sound, a beep, beep, a heart monitor's. Cold, rhythmic thumping, echoing in the immaculate silence, the sterile scent of a hospital room, sharp and faint in memory. Nurse's hand rested on my shoulder, gentle, unyielding. I swallowed hard as I acknowledged the events transpiring before me. I wasn't strong enough to wait. I wanted the pain to end, for all of us, the machines, the noise, the waiting. It broke something in me. I touched the drawing, fingers trembling with trepidation. I was holding her hand as Claire sobbed beside me, tears streaming down her face. The doctor asked, and I said. The memory fractured and distorted like film burning, eventually trailing off into nothing. I wanted it to stop, to finally end. This place wasn't haunting me. It was remembering for me. That's when a new door appeared before me. This one wasn't green, nor was it scorched. It was mirrored. It didn't reflect the room, however. It reflected me. The journal was open again with a new sentence brandishing its page. The final room is the one you made for yourself. I stepped through and found myself in the middle of a filing room. Drawers lined the walls, endless, relentless, each one labeled with a date. Day 17. Smiled back at a stranger. Day 92. Forgot her laugh. Day 114. Said, I'm okay, and meant it. Day 251. Told Claire I dreamed of her, but it was only static. Day 413. Said her name and didn't cry. These weren't just memories. These were records of my lies. The photographs on the walls were of my family, from a future that never got to exist. They were decomposing, dripping, melting like sugar in rain, and the audio that pervaded throughout. It was my voice. Splices of therapy sessions, police reports, and apologies, all forming a cacophony of guilt and uncertainty. You said you forgave yourself, but all you did was silence the guilt. A version of my own voice, colder, unfeeling, whispered in my ear. I screamed in fright and turned around, and that's when I saw him, the boy sitting on the bed earlier. Me. He sat curled in the corner, his face buried in his arms as he was crying. She waited so long, he whimpered, and now she's gone. He looked up, his eyes glassy and sorrowful. "Please, don't forget her again." His pleading voice broke. "I don't want to disappear." Then Claire appeared from the darkness beside him. This wasn't the soft Claire that I knew. This was the one who never got to bury Emily properly. "I needed you," she said, desolation painting every word. "You were playing detective in your head, solving a crime that didn't exist, making me a widow to your grief." Her face glitched like a poorly rendered animation between wedding photos, nightmares, and hallucinations. All the wrongs I ever put her through were manifesting themselves before me in a way that was both heartbreaking and frightening. "You didn't give her a choice. You left me in that room. You gave up the pain and left it all with me." I tried to speak, but the words were lodged in my throat, trapped in vain. But she and the boy were already fading, every version of them disappearing by means of unraveled static. I stood there, gutted and alone, my hands shaking with all the apologies I never gave. A second journal took their place. It opened to the first blank page. In a new hand, words revealed themselves on the page. "Write the real story, not the one you told yourself." As I finished reading the words, the filing room flickered like a bulb, choking on its own electricity, each detail of the room changing between the brief moments of darkness and light. My eyelids nictated to the rhythm of the strobing lights to reveal Room 409. I had returned to the place where it always begins. My eyes immediately noticed the VHS tape that sat by the bed. There was no label or any indication as to what it could be. I knew better than to go against the wishes of the room. I grabbed the tape and slid it into the VCR. The screen sputtered to life in a wash of white noise, and for once it didn't try to distort me. As the video played, I heard my voice come through. But this time, no spliced audio, no stitched narration. It was only me. "The detective believes he's solving a crime." I paused before continuing, but what he's really doing is trying to forgive himself. The tape cut to the Lotus Hotel with Brenner in frame, but I wasn't investigating, not anymore. "I came back because I thought I needed answers," I said. But what I needed was to feel it. I left the tape playing and walked to the next door, the audio becoming background noise as the sound of my footsteps seemed to amplify. This one wasn't sea glass green or mirrored. It was unmarked, unadorned, just a note taped in the center, written in red crayon in a childlike manner on a piece of notebook paper, was the sentence, "Your daughter is on the other side, but she's not waiting." Not waiting because she's gone? Or because I made her? "Wait too long?" I asked aloud as I placed my hand on the handle. I had spent so long trying to decode a puzzle, but maybe this was never about solving anything. It was about accepting what couldn't be undone. The only thing louder than that thought in my mind was the thundering sound of my heart against my rib cage. I don't know if this is truth or oblivion, but it's forward. It's toward her. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe it never even started. I've been thinking about how easy it is to make a place real. All that is needed are the right words, and someone willing to believe in them. You've been here long enough to know what the room is capable of. What if this place only exists because you read it? That's the problem with stories like this. The more you believe, the closer it gets to full power. And belief is a door you can't close. I walked through the door to find myself outside. I was standing on the cracked sidewalk across the street. From the Lotus Hotel, it looked the same as when I had first entered it all that time ago. It was like it hadn't aged, only waited, held in place by memory, not time. I stood in the parking lot, staring up at the 4th floor. Room 409, the neon buzzed and flickered overhead softly. The T was gone, burned out completely. Now it read, Lotus Hotel. Lose yourself here. Or maybe, lose us here. I stepped forward, the front doors groaning as I walked inside. The smell hit me first. Not the faint perfume from before, but something heavier. Stale flowers, disinfectant, the kind that clings to the halls of hospitals. There was no clerk, no guests, and no music. Just hallway after hallway, all leading to the same door. The elevator had no buttons, just a heartbeat. Mine, maybe. The doors to the elevator opened as I approached, as if anticipating my arrival. They delivered me with no resistance, no fanfare, only a soft chime, like a heart monitor resigning to silence. The 4th floor waited eagerly. Room 409 sat at the end like a final sentence. The number plate gleamed pristinely, not a scratch to be had. Even the building knew that this was the last page as I walked towards it. I placed my hand on the door. I didn't tremble. I had no fear, only a sense of finality. I brought all of me this time. The lock didn't click. It exhaled and opened. Inside the room hadn't changed at all. A bed, a desk, a mirror, but it felt emptied. Not like it were hollowed or haunted, but rather cleansed. There were no more illusions or versions of me, waiting in the corners with blame on their lips. Just the lingering quiet that filled the room and my conscience, the kind that follows a final scream. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and that's when he stepped out of the corner. Myself, the me I'd left behind, the one who first entered this place and never really left. He looked tired, worn but not broken, whole. I waited. He spoke, fingers twitching like he was holding back words. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, I know. He sat on the bed, shoulders curled inward like memory trying to disappear. You moved on. No, I tried. I buried you. I pretended you weren't still here. But I wasn't whole without you. He nodded solemnly. It hurt, being here alone. I knelt, not to grieve, but to witness. I didn't know how to carry you, or her. I left you behind to hold the pain for both of us. His eyes lifted slowly until they connected with mine. She still visits. Not really her, just the memory. The room keeps her here, too. I know. I cut myself short as I watched him reach into his pocket. He pulled out the bracelet, the one from the hospital bag, the one with the missing bead, the one I thought I'd imagined. He placed it in my palm and closed my hand around it. It was heavier than it should have been, but it was the weight of truth I had been neglectful of. The grief didn't scream anymore. It just sat beside me. I remember now. I spoke softly, letting the words resonate like an epiphany. You never forgot. You just didn't know how to remember without breaking. I clutched it to my chest. The truth hit, like cold water. I wasn't here investigating. I wasn't here chasing a lead. I was hiding. And that's when I saw it again. The memory, clear as day this time. We were in the hospital room. Claire held one of Emily's hands while I held the other. Claire had been crying for hours. Still, she forced a smile as the machines beeped in a heartless rhythm. She looked so small in that bed. She was so still and quiet. She wasn't the little girl I had watched grow up. Dr. Marla stood near the door, clipboard in hand, her eyes heavy with the kind of exhaustion that comes from telling too many families the same terrible truth. She asked us gently if we were ready. Remember Claire's voice cracking, saying, "She asked you to listen if it ever came to this." I remember nodding, but not because I was ready, but because she was. I leaned over and whispered something in Emily's ear, something I'll never repeat aloud or in writing. I kissed her forehead, trying desperately to retain what warmth still existed on my lips. And then I uttered the 6 words that will forever shatter my heart when I think about them. I understand. You can rest now. As the doctor turned off the machine, Emily's head tilted, eyes bright with a knowing sadness. The ensuing flat line and Claire's sobs filled the room in sweeping anguish, and all I could do was sit in that chair and break in silence. Back in the room, I opened my eyes to see the other version of me still standing in front of me. He smiled, but not the ones I was accustomed to from the reflections in the mirror. A real, genuine one. It was one that revealed relief and gratitude. He stood and made his way to the door, but paused at the doorway to turn to me for one last time. "Thank you for coming back." And then he dissipated into thin air. That's when room 409 began to change. The mirror cracked into a slow, web-like fracture, like the room itself was taking its final breaths. Every object flickered violently as the objects of the room began to copy, duplicate, and multiply. 2 beds, 2 chairs, 2 journals. The story I had been telling myself all this time. And the one that was real, colliding. The room was trying to overwrite itself. Fiction frayed at the edges as the walls pulsed and the lights strobed unpredictably. Felt as though the whole building was coming undone in real time, and I knew this was the moment she'd been asking for. I went towards the desk and opened the journal that rested on its surface. It wasn't blank, not anymore. The pages were filled, all of them had been written by my own hand. It wasn't the detective's story. There were no more lies, only the truth and her story, the one we started together. I turned to the last page. Emptiness. This was the story we never finished, until now. That's when I began to write. The words that poured out of me were not works of fiction or fantasy. They only consisted of the truth. She was brave, kind, and loved elephants, stories, and terrible knock-knock jokes. I watched a teardrop fall and hit the page. The moisture softening the words like a final hug I never got to give her. She asked me not to save her. I thought I was doing the right thing by having the machine be unplugged. She asked me to finish this, and I couldn't then, but I can now. The room rumbled and rocked like a victim to an earthquake. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the mirror caved in on itself. The wallpaper peeled back to reveal bare beams and an endless sky. And then, there she was. She wasn't a ghost, an apparition, or a vision. She was herself before everything that happened, smiling, soft, radiant, real. "You did it, Dad." Her voice echoed, reverberating within my whole body. The walls vanished and the light expanded to reveal a return of warmth I hadn't felt in years. That's when I felt myself become awake. Was back in my apartment. The journal sat on the table, open to the last page. My handwriting, shaky, uneven, filled the lines. I was no longer in room 409. I flipped through the journal, past every page of fiction it contained, every room and every red herring. No more. With clear hands, I wrote. Room 409 was never an investigation. It was a grave I built for Emily, brick by brick, so I could keep her close without admitting she was gone. Every clue, every scrap of evidence was just another excuse to talk to her when no one else could hear. The truth is, I didn't want answers. I wanted her. But the room kept changing. Pieces of me got lost inside its architecture. Until I saw him, the other me. He allowed me to relive that memory, the last time I was ever with Emily. He gave me the strength to free myself from the burdens of my lies, the ones that kept me in room 409. I'm going to post this where people can read my experiences and come to their own conclusions. In places where people can ask, is this real? And I can pretend the answer is no. I'm not saying this as a confession, more like it's the only way I know how to say goodbye. And because I hope you'll remember Emily, too. Memories. They hold us, sure, but they don't have to keep us there. Story number 2. I still don't know how to explain what happened without sounding insane, but I need to get it out before I forget pieces of it. I deleted and rewrote this 3 times because every version sounds too neat, like something someone would script. This is how it really felt, messy and half-remembered. For context, I live alone on the top floor of an old apartment building. The landlord is a guy who never fixes anything right. The pipes clank like they're having their own conversations, and the hallway light flickers in the exact same pattern every night. I work night shifts at a supermarket, so I sleep during the day. It's a weird schedule, but it paid the bills and kept me isolated, which I kind of liked. A few weeks ago, I came home around 8 a.m., exhausted, and passed out on the couch. I had my phone on the coffee table and a podcast still playing on the speaker at a low volume. I woke up 2 hours later because the podcast cut out mid-sentence. The speaker had switched itself to radio static, and there was a faint thumping coming from my bedroom wall, like someone knocking lightly but rhythmically. I thought it was the neighbors, but the knocks were 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 slow ones. It felt deliberate. I got up, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and went to my bedroom door. The knock stopped the moment I reached it. I listened for a while. In an old building, you get good at guessing where sounds come from, so you can blame them on something normal. This time the noise was inside the room, like someone was on the other side of the wall that my headboard touched. The radiator hissed. The building settled. I laughed at myself and went back to the living room, but I couldn't get comfortable. That night I couldn't sleep properly. Every time I drifted off, I had this impression someone was standing at the foot of the bed, watching me sleep. Not an intruder feeling, more like a weight. I chalked it up to exhaustion and slept for a few hours before my alarm for work went off. The weirdness stuck like a taste in my mouth, soft and persistent. Over the next week, the knocks became regular. Always 3 quick, pause, 2 slow. Always when I was trying to fall asleep. I taped a note to the wall on a whim, childish, like an experiment. If that's you, knock once. I laughed at myself putting it there, and kind of expected nothing. That night, 3 quick, pause, 2 slow, then 1 sharp, single, tap right, in the middle of the night. The note was still where I put it in the morning. I started recording. My phone sat on the bedside table as I fell asleep. In the morning, the file would be full of room noise and a few hours in, a single, unmistakable phrase caught by the microphone. It was not words exactly, more like syllables dragged low through the pipes. Sometimes it sounded like, here, sometimes, stay. Sometimes nothing I could pin down. Once, clearer than anything before, it sounded like my name. When something crosses that line between coincidence and intent, you change. I began to leave lights on, to keep my phone plugged in, to check the door twice. I would wake up, tangled, in the blanket, and see the shape of a person in the corner for a second. Then it would be gone. I told myself it was a combination of the radio static, the building settling, and sleep deprivation. I told my friend over text, and he made some jokes and told me to move out. That night, the knocks were slower, deliberate, very close. The next morning, I found scratches on the wall behind the headboard, small, like fingernails, forming no word I could read. I remember touching them, how cold the plaster felt under my fingers. I didn't tell anyone. I bought a cheap plug-in recorder and left it running all day and night for 3 days. When I listened back, I heard normal daytime sounds. The city, the kettle, the neighbor's door slamming. At 3:12 a.m. on the second night, there was a breathing sound on the file, not mine. It matched the rhythm I'd felt when I couldn't sleep. The audio then cut, and the last 30 seconds is nothing but a low, sustained noise that made my teeth ache when I played it through headphones. I started seeing small things move in the corner of my eye. A chair slightly shifted. A picture, frame turned face down. My phone would be angled differently on the table when I woke up than when I fell asleep. I began setting silly traps. I placed small objects on the floor, bottle caps, a pen, and checked them in the morning. Sometimes they were in the same place. Once the pen was gone, and there were 3 deep dents in the carpet where it must have been pressed. I thought about the rational options: mice, sleepwalking, an asshole neighbor. I filmed myself asleep to catch me getting up. But the footage never showed the motion I expected. The nights I played the footage back, I watched myself lie perfectly still, while something in the room shifted the way my ear hears a sound move across space. In one clip, the blanket flutters as if by a breeze, but the window is closed, the AC off. Something passes over the camera's lens, a shadow like fabric, but thicker, like a shawl dragged very slowly. The last straw was my phone. I woke up at 4 a.m. and checked it. because the static on the radio had become a background hum in my skull. There were 3 unread voice messages. I don't leave my phone to record by the bed. Someone else had to have left them there. Each message was 30 seconds of nothing. No voice, nothing. Until the very end, where a breath exhaled right into the microphone, and something said clearly, "Don't leave." I packed a bag. I told myself I would go to a friend's place for a night, and then decide. When I opened my closet to grab a jacket, the coat hanger scraped against the wood like fingernails. There are marks along the inside of the closet door now, parallel, like someone traced the length of the frame with their nails. I didn't take them for granted. I left. I didn't look back. I slept at my friend's place on a couch that smelled faintly of cigarettes and felt a stupid relief. In the morning, I texted myself a reminder to go back and get the rest of my things. And when I opened my phone, the text showed as delivered at 5:03 a.m. the night before, time-stamped, while I was on the couch, asleep. I never went back. The landlord called once, asking if I'd left the keys. He sounded like he was reading a script. I still get the impulse to check the thread of messages I left myself that night, because I think they will contain some explanation, a clue I missed. But I stopped listening to the recordings. I don't want to hear the breath at the end. I don't want to hear anything that sounds like my own name, said by someone who is not me. If you think I could just be dramatic, go back and read the timestamps on your own messages. Ask anyone who lives in an old building how easy it is to believe your walls are just settling until they are not. I don't know what was in my apartment. Maybe it was loneliness given teeth. Maybe it was the house itself, tired of being a box. Maybe it was something that learned how to imitate the pauses between my breaths. I have a copy of the last audio file saved in a folder I never open. Sometimes at night, when the world is quiet and my phone is on the table, I imagine 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 slow. It feels like a pulse now, like a metronome marking time for something that learned the pattern of my sleep. I keep telling myself I was lucky to leave when I did, but sometimes I wake up and for one breath, I am still on that couch, and I feel the weight at the foot of the bed, and the world narrows to a single, impossible voice saying, "Stay." Story number 3. The third tenant was a pale guy, tattoos all over his arm, and a large piercing in his ear. He looked sick and walked slowly. He told me he wanted to live in that house to get over his past, and I didn't want to ask for details. What really caught him was the forest view from the porch. He signed the contract on the spot, and the very next day his moving truck was parked in the garage. 2 weeks later, I realized I'd left my folder with some documents in the house and called the guy. No answer. I decided to drive out there and found the place empty, which was strange. He'd brought a lot of stuff during the move. His car wasn't in the garage, but I rang the bell anyway. Nothing. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, convinced something was wrong, but there was nothing to see. The house was empty. No furniture, dusty, just like it had been when I first showed it to him. A few months earlier, while eating breakfast, I got a call from a property owner who said she'd found me on Instagram. She told me she needed an experienced, fast-moving realtor to handle rental contracts for her house. and I lied. Said I was that guy, even though I'd only had my license for a little over a year. Her voice was old, raspy, almost broken, like someone with throat problems. She said she lived abroad and needed someone local. I wouldn't even have to look for tenants. She pitched. There was already a list of people interested, and they'd meet me at the house. I wasn't too excited. It didn't sound like much of an opportunity until she mentioned my commission. I nearly choked on the sandwich I was eating. I repeated the number back to her. Sure, she'd made a mistake, but she insisted it was right. That amount would be handed to me, in cash, once the tenant signed and moved in. The only condition, she said, was that if a contract was broken due to my negligence or choice, I'd have to pay 1 month's rent. On paper, it didn't sound bad. I accepted right away. The next day, I went to see the property. It was huge, isolated, no close neighbors. Inside, there were expensive wooden furniture pieces, sculptures, installations that must have cost a fortune. The porch opened up to a wide view of a forest. Big wooden chairs faced the woods, and the owner made a point of stressing that they could not be moved from their place. I imagined myself retired there, sipping coffee, bird watching. Coincidentally, the first tenants were a retired couple, escaping the chaos of the city. When they signed, I went home, torn between excitement and anxiety. Would the owner really pay me that much? I was broke. But a few days later, a suitcase showed up at my doorstep with the full amount in cash. Stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. Weird, yeah, but not weird enough to stop me from trading it in for a new car. About a month later, the owner called again, said the couple didn't work out, and new tenants wanted to see the house that day. I didn't ask questions. Couldn't complain about another commission. This time it was 2 women, a couple. One was a writer who told me she'd chosen the place to work on her next novel. Signing was easy, and another suitcase of money arrived the same way. Life was good, but honestly, I barely had other clients. All my golden eggs were tied to this strange owner I barely knew. Her name and info looked fake still, with the new tenants in. I figured I wouldn't hear from her for a while. Wrong. Another month later, same story. The women had left. Another new tenant. I was happy but suspicious. Why did everyone leave that house so quickly? Curiosity got me. So I called one of the last tenants. The number didn't exist anymore. I tried the old couple too. Same thing. After the third tenant, I tried to forget it. Not my problem. Who cared if they stayed or left? My fat commission was all I needed. Then, like clockwork, a month later, she called again. This time she sounded excited. Said the new clients were special, and she'd pay me double. I thought about asking questions, but double was too good. That kind of money could help me put a down payment on an apartment. I drove to the house determined to sign as fast as possible. I got there early and snooped around. No sign of anyone ever living there. Not even a pin dropped during moving chaos. Nothing. When the bell rang, I opened the door to a young couple holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket. I showed them the house, my stomach churning at what I could be part of. And of course, they loved it. The dad talked about how his kid would grow up running in the fields, exploring the forest, the childhood he never had. They signed right away. My hands were shaking when I handed over the paper. The next day was supposed to be their move-in. I went home and couldn't sleep. tossed and turned, thinking I might be helping some crime happen. Around 1 a.m., I gave up and drove back to the house. I needed to check everything with my own eyes. I searched every corner, bedrooms, closets, everything. Nothing. But I'd seen 3 moving trucks unload here. Not a single mark on the floor. Impossible. I stepped onto the porch, resigned that I'd never figure it out. Sat on one of those big wooden chairs, thinking what I might have missed. That's when I saw it. Something shiny stuck in a crack in the chair. I pulled it out. It was a piercing, probably from the last tenant. On the needle was a small red stain. Blood. I reached into the crack again, feeling around, and touched something soft. I pulled it out. It was an ear. Darkened. Rotten. With a torn hole where the piercing had been ripped out. I decided to push the chair to see what was underneath it, and with a lot of effort I managed to move it a foot to the side. On the wooden floor there was a symbol I couldn't recognize. Circles and shapes carved into the boards, right under where the chair had been, like some sort of ritual. There were more traces of blood there. I froze, staring at it, heart pounding. What snapped me out of it was a laugh that came out of nowhere. Woman's laugh, echoing from the darkness of the forest. It started low and distant, but quickly grew louder, hysterical. Then more laughter followed, all of them female, all coming closer, aimed at me. It was like a whole crowd was hiding in those woods. The sound grew louder and louder, until my instincts took over. I bolted to my car, started it up, and sped down the road. The next day I called the couple and told them the deal was off. Made up some excuse. They weren't happy, but I didn't care. Soon after, the owner called me again. I didn't pick up and blocked her number, but the calls kept coming. From all sorts of different numbers. I answered one, and it was her voice. Angry. You broke our pact. The rent will be collected at the end of the month. She kept repeating it, and I hung up every time. I went to the police. They went to the property. Found nothing. Then came back pissed because I had wasted their time. There were no ears, no marks, no nothing. Today is the 23rd, and next week the month ends. I keep wondering if I did the right thing, if maybe I should have just carried on with that commission. Every day that passes, I feel the panic building. My phone is always turned off, and I've rented a room in a roadside hotel outside the state. But even here, every night, I dream of that laugh. You survived, for now, but the shadows aren't done with you yet. If this story gave you chills like the video, share it with someone who dares to watch and comment your thoughts, especially if you're watching in the dark. Subscribe to Spectral Shadows, where fear never sleeps, and the next nightmare is always waiting. We'll be watching.